will you be doing in the future? And what you will be doing in the future is getting married and having babies.
Relationships. Life revolves around them. In a marriage, at the workplace, with the family. And while we want these relationships to be all they should be, we so often cause them to deteriorate.
I did not feel confident in making my own decisions.
Through anger, tension, deceit, conflict, and many other destructive problems. So how can we change? We need the Bible.
Like, is that something that can be done, or?
I don't know.
And that's why the Basic Life Principles Seminar was developed.
The beliefs that I had were hurting me, and were hurting the people around me.
Hello and welcome to Unreligiously. My name is Lauren, and today I am so excited to bring to you guys an interview that I have been sitting on for months. Our guest today, Jenni, who was formerly a member of the Institute in Basic Life Principles, or the IBLP. You may be familiar with that from the Duggars or the documentary Shiny Happy People on Amazon Prime.
It is natural to want to be married. That is a God-given desire. But it is not natural for a Christian to put anything before loving God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. And girls, with our minds, we really struggle with living in a fantasy world. Yeah, you with me?
Jenni grew up in all of that, and so today she is so bravely going to share her family story of hardship, of emotional pain, of deconstruction, of sibling on sibling sexual abuse, on emotional neglect, and so much more. Before we really get started, I do want to give you guys a trigger warning though. I've never done before. I should maybe start doing it more regularly, but I'm pointing that out to really say to you guys, if you're in a place where you can't hear about sibling on sibling abuse or family abuse dynamics, or you guys understand what comes along with IBLP. And so if you're not in a place where you can hear about family trauma or religious control right now, take care of yourself first. I really loved interviewing Jenni. I think that you guys will be able to see how genuine she is, how kind she is, how much she has thought through these issues and has really done the work to have a point of view that I think is not only worth sharing, but incredibly important to share. Please share love with Jenni in the comments. Even if you have had a different experience with IBLP or you disagree on some things, I think we can all really applaud Jenni for her bravery in sharing all of this because it will make a difference. Let's dive in.
Relationships. Life revolves around them. In a marriage, at the workplace, with the family. And while we want these relationships to be all they should be, we so often cause them to deteriorate. So how can we change? We need the Bible. And that's why the Basic Life Principles Seminar was developed. Believing that Scripture contains all the answers we need, this life-changing seminar is designed to help you learn those answers and apply them to the everyday struggles and problems that we all face.
The Basic Seminar deals with all the basic issues of life.
If Scripture is already spoken on it in principle, don't ever ask for another sign. You may get it, but it's not going to be God.
I was overwhelmed with just the simplicity of it.
It really gives solid answers to a lot of questions that Christians have.
We're running around for all kinds of counseling, and the counselors are giving you counsel and medication for the tormentors. And it's not working. Why? Because you'll never solve the problem until we get the strongholds torn down.
You know, taking that stronghold back, that part there where the teaching into the seminar was to overcome that stronghold. I just had never heard it taught that way. And it's not only with me, but my wife too, made a significant impact and opened our eyes.
My guest Jenni grew up in a family that was completely shaped, well, almost completely shaped by the IBLP.
My name's Jenni. I am the oldest of 6 kids. My parents were both, I'd say, culturally Christian and got into Bill Gothard's IBLP Institute in Basic Life Principles seminar and found that really impactful in their lives. One of them even cites it as when they became a Christian, like in the meeting.
Her parents were really sucked in through the seminars that they gave back in the 1980s because they wanted to find a sense of certainty. I think it's really normal for young, new parents to look for guidance on how to raise great children. And what her parents ended up finding was Bill Gothard and IBLP. It was a framework that promised blessings for their children if they taught them obedience, if they disciplined them correctly, and that disaster would fall upon them if they were disobedient. It's really, really important to understand that for families like the one we're covering in this interview, this isn't just religious teaching. This isn't just run-of-the-mill Christianity. This is an entirely different, almost social architecture that dictates how you dress, how you can parent, how you're allowed to date, how you can behave in marriage, what behaviors are acceptable, how to discipline them, and even a clear structure for who has the authority over every single decision if you're a woman.
They both had relationships before they had this conversion, and they decided they weren't going to be sexually active prior to marriage. They didn't even kiss. Nor did they actually talk about whether or not they wanted children. And I was a honeymoon baby. My parents say that they took one look at me and thought, let's get some more. And they did. It was girl, girl, boy, girl, girl, boy, 6 kids. When I became old enough to think about, going to school, my parents decided, well, we could try homeschooling. We'll see how it goes.
As you can see, Jenni's parents did commit to a much larger level of this control early on. I want to remind you guys that it is never somebody's fault for getting sucked into these groups. And this is a gray area because I don't want to in any way excuse the parents who have been abusive because of these teachings, because of what the IBLP has taught them.
And when he was about 14 months old, I just didn't know what to do with him. And I would spank that child all day long.
When we are weighed down with the responsibilities of caring for a family, it's easy for us just to want good character to happen.
Hey, give me back my truck. Ow, stop pinching me. Kids, can't you just love each other?
But good character doesn't just happen.
We are instructed to teach children to do what is right.
But there is a small percentage of parents who made really bad and unrecoverable decisions because they were genuinely trying to do the right thing.
I recommend the basic seminar to all that I come in contact with because it works.
I thank God daily that I was given the opportunity to go through it.
I recommend the basic seminar to every leader, whether it be a pastor, teacher, whatever.
This week of seminar changed my life, gave me insight that I would trade my college education for.
It really is something that can differ family to family to family. I personally know people who I homeschooled around that grew up in the IBLP, and I can honestly say in those circumstances, the people that I personally know, I don't think that those parents get a pass. I don't think that they can just say, well, I didn't know, because the abuse was much beyond blanket training, which is still horrendous. Blanket training, if you don't know, in the IBLP is where you keep a baby on a blanket, and every time they try to move off the blanket to teach them to stay put in boundaries, you flick them as hard as they can, which is abusive. You can actually bruise babies by doing that. It's somebody that worked in, I was the infant room teacher at a daycare. I'm not saying that's the longest time ever, but that is certainly enough time around infants to that be appalling. I mean, that's genuinely disgusting.
I'm going to spank you. So lean over here right now. And Jason, you're a fine boy. You're going to grow up to be an outstanding man. God's hand is on your life, son. Now, okay, let's see. Okay, we'll get back your hug. I don't think you put yourself into that hug, son.
So there are parents that have made mistakes, but I think are redeemable in general. And then there are parents who have kind of used this as an excuse to abuse their children. And It's hard to see the difference. So I do just want to bring that up, and you guys can let me know in the comments what you think. Her parents decided not to kiss before they got married, and they did want to model a very obedience-based and very rigid Christian lifestyle for their children. Jenni herself was the oldest child and a honeymoon baby, as she would self-describe, and her birth became the starting point for a Christian home that was formed entirely around this IBLP structure.
I was homeschooled K through 12, as were all my siblings. It was the ATI curriculum, Advanced Training Institute, the wisdom workbooks, also some Saxon math and, a little bit of history, very manifest destiny and creation science stuff.
It was formed around authority and submission. It was formed around the idea that any sort of misstep could bring you divine consequences, and that to disobey was a really heavy sin. Her schooling was home-based, and they used the ATI version of curriculum and the wisdom booklets.
Look it. I found it. I found the lesson in the wisdom booklets that taught about dinosaur bones and why I believed that dinosaurs and people existed at the same time. Look at this. Look. Lesson 2. Okay. Dinosaur bones. Can you tell what these are? What? Of course you can't. It's a blurry black and white picture. So obviously paleontologists can't tell either. So they're wrong. Okay. Same section. Oh, look. Look. People. There it is. We found the source. This part is also really, really heavy on thermodynamics, and it feels very... In 1987, thermodynamics proved that evolution was false. I was a fundy, and a fundy just believes.
These were actually produced by IBLP, and I have gotten my paws on these before in the past. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but I will say that they are not appropriate to be your entire educational program for your child.
With wisdom booklets, your parents would, let's say that your family gets into ATI, right? So this curriculum gets mailed to you. My mom was all aflutter. We had 3-ring binder notebooks, and we would put this first wisdom booklet, which literally had all of this information for us that we would study and expand upon the information in there for our education. We would do this for a month to 6 weeks. So usually 4 to 6 weeks is how long they would want you to study and work within a wisdom booklet. And it always is centered around one Bible verse from the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7. If you don't know that, bless you, you don't know that. But there was a question and answer on the front, and I think that led us to have this expectation of what we were going to learn within the booklets. We go about our school day. We would sit at the table, we would open up our wisdom booklets, and we would dive into the Bill Gothard curriculum first. So usually 2 to 3 hours with a 15-minute break somewhere in there. We would do Bill Gothard's information and booklets until lunchtime, and usually in the afternoon we would go to other addendum curriculums like Bob Jones University. There are a bunch of others. PJC has some Christian homeschooling, Becca, etc. So Bill was half of our day. And his information was entrenched in our minds. And here we go. Wisdom quiz. This is what you quiz on this before you go through the curriculum. It is on Matthew 5:1a, which says, "And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain." I can't wait to figure out what we're going to learn from that. Number 1, the multitude that came to hear Jesus was the result of a well-organized promotional campaign by his disciples. True or false? And then it says, what does this answer tell us about how to gather a crowd for hearing the gospel? I kid you not, this was my education, motherfuckers. And everybody wonders why I feel less than. All right, question number 2. The crowds who came to hear Jesus wanted to learn how to have eternal life. True or false? What does this tell us about the importance of meeting people's immediate needs? I'm telling you, you guys are going to learn why I'm mega fucked up. Question number 3 in this first wisdom quiz. In order to reach as many people as possible, Jesus made it easy for them to hear the gospel. True or false? Side note, based on Christ's example, should we require commitments of those who desire to hear God's answers? I mean, I don't know. I'd love to hear from all you Christians. Like, just please give me the answer. When Jesus saw the multitudes, he was aware of each individual, but he gave special attention to the men, true or false. Side note, what direction does this give us for whether we should concentrate on men, women, or children in the ministry? I'm just hoping to learn my letters and my numbers.
If you wanted to use the wisdom booklets as a resource to teach your kid about the Bible and teach them things from a Christian point of view, I still wouldn't recommend it, right? Like, I would be against that. But I do think that you could use it in that way, but you would still need a really robust curriculum to keep them on par with their peers. And this is a top complaint from people who went through these programs.
And I was 20 when I was informed that masturbation was something that women could do. I thought it was exclusively the male male thing. So, like, if that gives you any indication of just how much sexual education was lacking.
People do describe it as educational neglect. Jenni is not the only family who's gone through this. Unfortunately, this is a very popular program through homeschooling. Jenni also references Saxon, which, if any of you have homeschooled, I guarantee you just puked a little bit in your mouth, because that's how much homeschool children do not like Saxon math, specifically Saxon math. But this is all to say that you have to be really careful. I think people don't understand when you homeschool what that really means, and they just picture your parents teaching you every day. But the reality is that they go to conferences and they pick out your curriculum every single year, and it might be different in every subject. You might actually be in different grade levels in every single subject every year. There were several years where I personally even remember not knowing what grade I was in, because it's like, well, in these subjects, you know, I'm in this grade and then I'm 3 years behind in math. Workbooks like the ATI curriculum or the wisdom workbooks aren't just these kind of neutral academic workbooks that you can use as a tool. They do try to fully teach children history and math and science and writing, all through a lens of like a spiritual Christian destiny and through creationism and fundamentalist ideas. But they also, throughout all of their curriculum, will try to reinforce to the reader the idea that obedience and moral hierarchy are so important to keep at the forefront of your mind at all times.
As ATI kids, we're learning about back in our rigorous homeschool education. Ah yes, the persecuted palm tree. We are so very persecuted. Never forget, kids, the more godly you are, the more the world will hate you. Libel and slander laws were an important concept. Here's how we hurt each other with the words. Bill Gothard loved the character quality definition, that's for sure.
Something that really stands out to me, and something that I think we should pause on for a moment, is that when you grow up in this type of environment, when you're taught these types of things, even through your curriculum, every part of your day is based around godliness and holiness, it can really impact your relationship to religion. This can actually be something that grows more of a negative relationship to God and to faith, and can cause children to develop a lot of spiritual anxiety or internalize messages that are not really the best for them to be internalizing at a young age.
The message that I got a lot was, God may love you, but he doesn't like you very much. I very much personally felt like God was always looking for, like, waiting for me to mess up and then finding arbitrary ways to indicate to me that I'd messed up. So, for example, I told you I just hit a deer. If I was still in it, it would be like, well, have you been faithful with your tithing? Maybe this is a financial punishment because you haven't been tithing, or who knows what, but it wouldn't even necessarily have to be that connected. to be something bad happened. It's what are you doing wrong that caused this bad thing to happen?
That's something that, even though I did not grow up in the IBLP, I can certainly relate to. I can definitely relate to feeling like God loved me because the Bible said he did, but he did not like me in any way. And that's a really hard feeling to sit with. It's not a small thing. It's a clear picture of what can cause constant self-doubt and internalized fear and lifelong shame in the children that go through this programming. Everything that happened in the home was connected to a framework of accountability, of moral accountability. This is the point where I have to introduce something to you guys that is used a lot in IBLP, but is not solely used in IBLP. And this is the umbrella of authority. This is something that I even remember growing up with, and I wasn't in the IBLP strictly, although I did use like adjacent curriculum. The umbrella starts with God, then it's the husband, then the wife, then the children, then other people. That is how it goes. This is also gendered, right? So the male children are going to be over their sisters in authority, even if there are age differences. And this is something that Jenni really touches on and talks about a lot throughout her interview. Gender order, gender hierarchy made a big difference in her family and made it so that negative things could occur in secrecy.
In IBLP, at least in our family, there was a pretty strong emphasis on birth order and then the firstborn son. So it didn't matter that I was, 6 years his senior. He was the one because he was the firstborn son. I always bristled against that. I wouldn't have been able to articulate it, but I was like, why is he better than me? My brother definitely internalized that golden child kind of mindset. He could get away with more. My parents would, of course, oh, no, but us siblings, we knew like, oh yeah, the golden child. I remember asking my dad when I was maybe 13 or something, I'm under your authority, yep. And then I'm under your authority until I get married, right? Yep. And I'm under my husband's authority. Yep. Well, what if I don't get married and like you die? What then? And he's like, well, you'd be under your 7-year-old brother's authority. It was not comforting to me. I did not like that.
I want you guys to really sit with that for a second. Can you imagine being told that your brother who is in elementary school would be your authority, your spiritual authority? If your father died, that would be terrifying news to me. I think that this is something that goes unsaid a lot when we talk about the IBLP. People don't really talk about these sibling dynamics and the control that women face even from their male siblings. This isn't just from God and their father or God and their husband. This is also from the other males around them. Really sit with that and think about what that would do to you psychologically to grow up with that belief from a young age. But this type of sibling dynamic wasn't the only negative belief that was inherited through the IBLP system. Jenni actually does share even more about what type of messaging she internalized throughout her time in the IBLP.
It made it so I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. What am I supposed to be doing? I had a lot of stress about that. And when I was, 18 and on, I remember my dad saying, well, you're asking God for this guidance for what you should do, but he's already given you the guidance that you should be baptized and you haven't done that yet. So why would he give you any other guidance if you haven't taken the guidance he's already given you? So I got baptized, and still did not get guidance.
For a lot of women who leave the IBLP, they report going through a period where it's actually hard to make decisions on their own. They've grown up being told that their heart is deceitful above all else, they can't trust themselves, and that they need to look to their authorities to tell them how to live, how to behave, what decisions to make. It's very hard to grow up with always having someone to tell you what to do, to all of a sudden be kind of floating around as your own person, independent, and trying to figure out, well, what actually is right? Can I trust myself? Am I capable of coming to the right conclusions on my own? And that's very difficult.
I did not feel confident in making my own decisions. I did not feel confident in choosing what I wanted. I did not feel comfortable trusting myself for what it was that I might want. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? So the fact that I want something is not an indication that maybe I should pursue that. It's an indication that I should look out. And I developed this feeling of the will of God was this very narrow, specific thing. And that if I chose something else, like this especially came into place after I graduated high school, and I was supposed to like choose a major or know what I was supposed to be when I grow up. And I had no idea. I knew like, oh, well, I'm going to be a wife and a mother, but I need to find something to do until then.
She didn't feel totally comfortable in what she knew and the abilities that she had, or even in trusting that the things that she wanted in life were valid and things that she could go for. She even quoted scripture saying that the Bible says that the heart is deceitful above all things. And this is a verse that can be really thrown at you, especially in your teen years, and especially from your family when you grow up in an IBLP style setting. What it really means to a young developing mind is that any of their desires, their feelings, everything that they should be comfortable exploring at this time, it's all a trap and it can't be trusted. It really does start to feel like every move you make, every thought you allow into your mind, all of it is something that God is using to judge you with. And even as she moved on and went through high school or moved on to college, the expectations about what she was supposed to do with her life actually was clear.
What will you be doing in the future? And what you will be doing in the future is getting married and having babies and homeschooling your babies. And I was aboard for that. I was like, oh yeah, like this is of course what I would do. But what am I supposed to do until then? Like I don't see anybody I need to marry just yet. I bounced around a lot from some different careers, very much a tumbleweed. Eventually I was like, this is ridiculous. I just need to finish my degree because I had an AA. And I was like, it doesn't matter. The message that I'm getting from the world is that it doesn't actually matter what my degree is in. I just need to get my degree. In the process of getting a degree, I discovered I really loved like market research. And so I ended up getting my degree in communication studies and psychology minor and actually working in market research.
Her purpose as a woman, as a young woman, was to get married and to have kids, to become a wife and a mother. And everything that had led up until that point was just preparation for all of that. Whether it's the chores you do as a young woman, whether it's home management tasks you're assigned, or just taking on a lot of childcare in your home, all of that is seen as God preparing you for what's to come. All of it is seen as being practice for the role you're going to one day fill. And Jenni does remember being 15, specifically when her youngest brother was born.
It certainly wasn't as bad as the Duggar situation where it was, you're this person in charge of this person or that person. We were spaced out it was 3 years apart, pretty much across the board. I remember you got to set a good example for your siblings. Setting the right example of what you should be doing, or for the other kids. So it wasn't nearly as formal, but it was there. Keeping a house going. There were chores, and then of course you watch your siblings while I go to the grocery store. That sort of thing. Some people would think, "Oh, I got enough babies in my own childhood that I don't need a baby in my own life," sort of situation. And it wasn't quite like that. Although my youngest sibling, I was 15 when he was born, and I felt like he was my baby. The one thing I remember really questioning myself, do I really want to be a mother, or is that just what was modeled for me and therefore that's what I will do.
Even if you're not taking on a full parental role, it can make it seem like this is the only path for you if that's what your mother and all of the women, adult women in your life are doing. If all of them are having a lot of kids and homeschooling them, raising them in the church, you do see that as kind of the path that you probably will take as well. That's normal for children. I think all of us probably can look to our parents and their lifestyles and see things that we copied from that we appreciated from that. Maybe you went into the same career field as one of your parents, but whether we like it or not, we are all influenced by our growing up, our environment in some way. And as you grow up, these impacts definitely extend to dating. This is an area of life, particularly for the young women growing up in IBLP, that is highly controlled and highly under the influence of your father, or, as she's mentioned, if your father is not there, a brother.
Anytime I had someone who I was like, if I had like a little bit of an interest, my dad would say like, well, do you think you're ready to get married? I had 3 boyfriends. So the first one was my first love. Man, the first relationships, they hit hard. The second one, the first one, he was a great guy. He had a lot of great qualities, but he didn't love me. So the next guy, he loved me, but he didn't have a lot of those other qualities that I wanted. And that kept me kind of in limbo for a long time. Like, am I moving forward with this relationship or are we not? Because he had this thing that he wanted to be like a nomadic missionary where he wouldn't know where he was going to sleep or what he was going to eat day to day. And he would travel around with his harp and play music and people would just take him in. And I'm like,
realistic? Like, is that something that can be done, or?
I don't know.
Very dangerous, but noble.
I know. Yeah, like I was like, I said, I knew already that I did not feel called to be a missionary or a pastor's wife. So eventually that relationship ended, but I had spent a long time, 5-10 years, I can't remember anymore at the moment, with him. And I felt really angry at myself for having wasted so much time. In part because it was a comfortable relationship. If he would have asked me to marry him, I would have said no, and then it would have been over. But he didn't ask, and it just was comfortable. And then when that ended, I was very upset at myself for how long that took me.
Many people who grow up dating in IBLP culture face the judgment around baseline activities like hand-holding or front-hugging or even side-hugging your partner too often. And as somebody that did not grow up in the IBLP but did grow up facing some of this same judgment, it really did impact me. One example is that I was at a homeschool co-op and we were allowed to leave for lunch. I may have shared this story with you guys before. We were allowed to leave for lunches, and one day nobody wanted to go walk to Domino's with me except for this one guy that I was friends with in my class at the time, and I was like in 7th grade. Literally across the street, there's not even like a seating area. You guys know how like those pizza places are, like you walk in and you order and there's like 3 seats there for you to wait for 15 minutes and then you leave. And so we went over there, we got our pizzas, and then we walked back to the homeschool co-op to eat. And somebody's mom had picked up their kid and brought them home, because at co-op you just sign up for different classes, so your schedules might be different. Somebody's mom saw that I was walking across the street with a boy, and they were like, that is so inappropriate, they could be sexually active. And they called the director of the homeschool co-op. And by the time that my mom picked me up an hour and a half later, she was already, and she, to her credit, she wasn't like mad about it, but she was just like, hey, you're not allowed to go across, the street for lunch anymore. And I was like, why not? Everyone goes and gets, other people just didn't want Domino's today. And it's like, well, it just looks really bad. And you have to it trains you to be constantly aware of what other people might be thinking. What if somebody from your church was driving down the street and saw you giving them the side hug? And you're actually really taught this idea that you're living in a fishbowl. So if you guys haven't heard this before, let me explain. The idea that you're living in a fishbowl is that you are in a fishbowl as a Christian, and the world is the people that are outside the fishbowl watching you. And even if you think you have a secret moment behind your rock, you're in a glass fishbowl, and everyone can see everything that you're doing at all times, and you need to act as such. That is, in general, right? Like, I get if you tell a kid this once on a, like, do the right thing, don't worry about if other people are watching or not, because they could be, but that shouldn't be your concern. You should be doing the right thing because you want to do the right thing. I think you could teach this as a lesson one time, maybe, to constantly have these messages thrown at you, to constantly be told that your desires, even just to hold hands with a partner that you've been dating for a year, that is wrong, that is the flesh, it's sinful and evil. That definitely does have lasting impacts on people. And if I can say it for myself, it took all of the joy out of relationships and dating. When I was a Christian, dating was not fun on any level. It basically just felt like a giant test. It felt like at every turn there was a giant test, and is this for marriage? What if it's not for marriage? And then if I think that it's not that day, then like my moral responsibility is to break up right away because I'm only supposed to be dating for my future spouse. It was hard. It was so hard.
I got a lot of flack from my immediate family and even some extended family because I was, holding hands or, having hugs that weren't side hugs or like a leave room for Jesus sort of situation. And that was me at 19. I got some judgment for that.
Any hint of physical affection or intimacy, even if it was something as simple as holding hands or side hugs, all of that is going to be met with criticism. You're going to be asked if your heart is in the right place and what those things could be leading to. And at the end of the day, it does just shame you. Relationships aren't just about meeting people, having fun, personal growth, or trying to build a life with someone. It is a test for marriage, and you have to be very, very intentional, almost like sure that you are going to marry that person before you even start dating, which to them, they would call it courting, not dating.
Told the next guy, I'm like, look, here's the deal. I will date you for 1 year. At the end of the 1 year, we're either getting engaged or we're breaking up. Like, I'm not messing around anymore. Yeah. And he was down with that. And after a year, he proposed. And then my parents were like, whoa, hold on. So then we had the whole time with my parents trying to convince them about that it was okay for me to marry him. And I remember feeling this, like, I want to marry him. Is that enough? Is this feeling that I want something enough of a reason for me to do it? And just struggling with that a lot. And, looking back, I wanted my life to start. Your life didn't start until you were married. I was still living at home. I was 35, kind of in a state of arrested development. And I wanted my life to just start, and I was tired of waiting for my life to start. And also I had some, what is this sex I've heard all about? Might that be fun? I don't know. Though if you want to find out, you got to get married. I mean, it wasn't like I got married just for sex. It was a lot of things, but if we would have just moved in together and we would have just had sex and whatever, that would have been better than just getting married. Of course, my parents would not have felt that way. But
all of this lays a clear framework for the other types of beliefs that Jenni talks about, one of which is what leads to silence in the face of abuse. One of the main controversies that Jenni does talk about throughout her interview is this concept of giving a bad report about somebody else. It's really saying anything negative about anyone.
One of the key teachings, which has been in my family, is the giving a bad report. The idea is that if someone hurts me, offends me, God will give me the grace to forgive them. But God doesn't also give that grace to someone else. So if I tell you about what someone else did to me, you don't get the grace from God to help forgive them for that offense, and I've just planted a seed of bitterness in you.
The idea is that if someone hurts you, if they do something wrong to you emotionally, physically, or otherwise, then God will give you this sense of peace or grace or just this ability to forgive that person and to help you. But he doesn't give that to everybody else. And so when you give a bad report, you're sowing seeds of bitterness in everyone else's hearts. And while you might be able to forgive, now you've kind of like tripled the sin by spreading it around, and God isn't going to help them with that same bitterness.
You know, being bitter is pretty much the worst thing that you can be. You're giving ground to Satan. You're giving a stronghold in your life. So bitterness is one of the worst things that you could be. And forgiveness to my parents meant complete reconciliation and rejoining.
And I get that on the surface, this might feel, especially to my Christian audience, really similar to this idea of just forgiveness that's common in Christianity. But I do think that this is a little bit different.
We can ask ourselves two things. What character does God want to build in my life through this irritation? And what fruit does he want from my life because of allowing it?
It discourages people from reporting real harm and crimes, and it creates a community that is filled with shame and secrecy and unspoken rules. It makes it almost impossible to uncover or expose abuse in these settings.
Earlier, I was talking about the giving of a bad report, and that was the reason why no one talked about it. This giving of a bad report, which was a Gothard special that emerged after his brother was accused and found by the organization to have been abusing a younger woman.
These teachings in IBLP, combined with the parental structure that was created in Jenni's home, the gender hierarchy, and just even the internalization of guilt and shame, all of that creates conditions where abuse can occur unnoticed pretty easily. It's not uncommon for families in these situations to not really have the framework to understand abuse or to notice the signs if it's occurring even in their own family. When Jenni talks about her marriage, you can feel how similar the dynamics truly are to other forms of fundamentalist Christianity and how common this experience is.
Down the road, I got married, and I knew I did not want a honeymoon baby. So I made sure that didn't happen. And we deconverted, both my husband and I deconverted from Christianity. So the IBLP parts I'd already started shedding. So back a year or so before I got married, I was saying some of these things to my, future husband, and he was like, "What is that? Like that doesn't make any sense." And I started to explore some of the IBLP teachings. And I was in college at the time, and I had a professor who was nice enough to allow me to do a self study on the book A Matter of Basic Principles, which is an excellent book for anyone who has been in IBLP or ATI. It's written by Christians for Christians, for the Christian perspective, talking about Bill Gothard and like the setup of the culture when he kind of came on the scene, how the culture was primed to swing back to the right, I guess. And when I started reading the book, my opinion about him was that he was a good guy who had mostly good teachings, but had a few wonky things, like syncopation didn't necessarily have to be of the devil. Going through that book, honestly, if it hadn't have been a college course thing. I'm not sure if I would have finished the book because it was so deeply uncomfortable to read.
This wasn't because her husband was too similar to the family that she grew up with, but because she had already grown up to view things like submission and silencing yourself and erasing your own needs as your role as a woman.
When I was dating my future husband, he was also from a fundamentalist Christian family, but not Gothard. He was in a tough situation and he was 18 and he asked if he could come home with his girlfriend just to get his legs under him because he was trying to move back into the local area. And his parents are like, boy, we'd love to help you if you were married, but you're living in sin with your girlfriend, so we can't do that. So he went to Kmart and bought a wedding ring and they got married the next day. Two 18-year-olds, young and dumb. It lasted about 5-ish years or so. And, but my parents believe marriage is like forever.
Yeah.
So even though his wife had cheated on him and he was a Christian and she wasn't, like all the various things that are in the Bible that kind of give you some wiggle room on divorce. Even though those were there, my parents are like, well, he's still like married in the eyes of God to her. And if you marry him, that's like you're marrying into an adulterous relationship.
In IBLP culture, marriage is really pitched to young women as the absolute peak for women, the absolute best way for you to practice patience and love and learn how to be a godly woman.
We both spent a lot of time in Bible study trying to talk with my parents, trying to receive their blessing. Eventually, it was evident that that was not going to happen because of that umbrella of protection, umbrella of authority. I'm under my father's authority. Marrying him was like akin to disobedience and putting myself sort of in harm's way.
We're taught through purity culture that this is actually a reward for purity, for their submission to God. But what Jenni describes is how this old belief really impacted her current marriage. What Jenni describes truly is the change that these young women experience when the headship that they observe goes from their father over to their husband once they get married. Since her early childhood, Jenni was taught that marriage was the ultimate purpose for a godly woman. It's not about partnership to people in this mindset. It's not about mutual care, although they might feel like it is, but the structure doesn't present it that way. When you grow up in this culture, being a good wife and a good woman means being accommodating pretty much endlessly, being self-sacrificial in every area of your life, and being silent when it comes to issues or how people treat you or even your own needs. Pain is something that's supposed to be handled spiritually within yourself rather than to be actually dealt with and fixed. When people that grow up in this culture step into marriage, they don't just bring themselves, they also bring along with them the messages that they were taught from a young age. They bring with them expectations and ideas of who they're supposed to be, who their spouse is supposed to be. They might bring along with them these ideas of giving a good report of others and not rebelling, of submission. It's not that young people want to lose themselves, it's that they're taught that this is holy, this is the right way, and this is what is going to actually bring them freedom. While you're listening, you might say, why would somebody willingly restrict themselves so much? But when you grow up like this, you really are taught that what the world is doing is restriction and what you're doing is freedom. What really stands out to me in this part of Jenni's story is how familiar this exact pattern is in other high control religious environments. When you've been taught that pain and suffering is something that is going to purify you over time and that long suffering is a virtue, then you learn to interpret red flags as God just trying to redeem you and make you holier. Jenni describes that her marriage did end up becoming a mirror of her upbringing. It's not exactly identical, and she does talk a lot about their deconstruction, which I'll share with you more here.
After about a year, or a little less of being married, we both deconstructed everything. And that was a terrible, terrible time. It was very painful. I'd spent my whole life thinking I was a turtle safe in this shell. And then I just found out that no, I'm just a little salamander out here, very, very vulnerable. Like there's no, I don't have this protection or this guardian that I thought I had. I had to grieve all over again the loss of my dear grandma because I believed I would see her again. And it was just a really, really hard time. I didn't deconstruct so much as I was deconstructed. My husband was the one asking the questions. I was trying very hard to find the answers and to fix this, help him, get back on track. I talked to my mom. I said, Mom, when you were a little girl, you believed in Santa Claus, and then you didn't. You can't just now say, okay, well, why don't you just choose to believe in Santa Claus? Is you can't just choose to believe. And that's one thing I keep saying to, even today, to my parents, saying, they're like, oh, you chose to walk away, or, I'm like, no, I didn't. Like, I did not want to lose my faith. I lost my faith. My faith was broken. I even tried for a little while, telling myself that I could just pretend. I could just pretend. I could still go through the motions, but I couldn't.
When Jenni finally decided to separate from her husband during COVID, the theology that had once told her that she would be safe had turned against her.
Before lockdown, I saw the writing on the wall and was at a place in my marriage where my choices were be locked down with my husband or be locked down anywhere else. And I chose anywhere else. He had gotten rather abusive, and it was hard for me to extract myself from that situation. But, COVID actually kind of helped in that sense. It also provided me space to process this, but out of the public eye, because no one except my family knew that I wasn't sheltering in place with my husband. It wasn't like I was having to go to social events and people like, oh, well, where's your husband? And I'm like, yeah, who knows?
Many families with this belief system, they can frame divorce not just as a necessary next step a person has to take, but as a rebellion against God and if you're the woman, your authority figure is your husband. Families growing up in this type of belief system, suffering isn't necessarily proof that something is going wrong. It's more evidence that you need to be taught something. You might think that the end of Jenni's marriage and her deconstruction is kind of the end of this story. We've covered a lot of topics, but the reality is we're just getting to the hardest and most gutting part of Jenni's story.
Just a few years after COVID, when restrictions would start to loosen up, one of my sisters disclosed to me that she had been sexually abused by the golden child, starting when she was 6 and he was 12, and continuing until I think she was 15 and he was 21.
There is a certain kind of heartbreak that happens when you realize your family is not what you thought that they were, that you didn't have the whole picture or ever really see them for who they were. For Jenni, that moment came when her sister shared with her what had been happening to her over a period of many, many years.
It still is very difficult for me to process as a sibling of both of the victim and the offender. There's a part that grieves a family that I thought I had, but I didn't have. The family where we're all together and cozy, but it wasn't that way. For years, my sister had been enduring abuse multiple times a week. Who was this who was my brother that he could do this? And how is it that none of us noticed? Like, we were a family of 6. We were all living in a house. together. How is it he got away with this for years?
That realization had to have changed everything. It wasn't just abuse that had happened to her sister, it was that it had happened within a system that claimed to be safe and within a family that told everybody they were righteous and that they believed were on the right path. All of us have had probably grow up with some lesser realizations about our family members that are hard to swallow, so I can only imagine what this kind of reveal would do to your mental state. All of this had occurred in a system that had said that they would be safe, they would be blessed for their sacrifices, and that their children would grow up safe and happy. In a ton of IBLP families, the response to crisis within the family isn't really to seek the truth and continue to uncover things. It's to maintain control over the situation and to wash away the negativity.
My brother had mentioned something to someone, and they told their parents, and their parents told my parents. My parents went back to my brother and were like, what's this? And it's over. That was in the past. Well, as much as yesterday was in the past, he really downplayed it. He didn't give any indication of how long or how frequent or to what level any of it was. My parents said, my sister seemed fine. And so they said, well, I guess everything's fine. I guess it's in the past. It's over. It was hidden from me for an additional 15 years. Meanwhile, my sister, believing herself to be damaged goods, thought she'd never get married, that no one would want her, made to feel like it was her fault.
They're trained to handle these types of problems in their own home and not seek outside help. The idea of them involving the police or therapists or trained professionals or even just continuing the conversation and keeping it open is seen as giving a bad report and perpetuating that type of sin vein throughout their life.
My sister had started to bravely talk first with one sibling, then with another. When I found out, I was like, I do not want to see my brother. I do not want to speak with my brother. When I found out, it was a week before a wedding that our whole family was going to, and I told him, do not show up. I don't care what excuse you make. Do not be there. I think that I opened up for my sister the possibility of not being around our brother. That wasn't something that she felt that she could ask for until I was like, I'm not going to be around him.
Yeah.
I'm not, this is not something that I'm okay with happening.
So when Jenni's family learned about the abuse, it doesn't surprise me that their first instinct wasn't to go to the police or to tell other family members or to cut off the son who had done the harm. I know that if you didn't grow up in an environment like this, it's easy to blame people for what they did do and didn't do, and I'm not saying whether blame should be thrown around here or not and who, but the point that I'm trying to make is that a lot of these people are primed for this type of response, and in this way, adults that are in the IBLP also experience abuse. This isn't something that just happens to the children. That being said, of course, it is always the parents' responsibility to make sure that their children are safe and to make the right choices. That's not something that we can just gloss over. I can't imagine how disorienting it must have been for Jenni to have to stand in the middle of all of that, to advocate for her sister and to learn about it herself, to educate others, to hold that ground with her brother, who I'm sure she has complicated feelings about. But Jenni didn't deny the reality, and she put her sister first. When she talks about it, you can hear how difficult this was for her, how torn she was. She was definitely angry at what had happened and upset that her parents had not done the work to try to prevent this abuse from occurring again. But it's also so hard to truly accept what happens. It's hard to accept it, especially, I would imagine, as a sibling who wasn't there. You don't see it firsthand, and you know these things are true and you believe it, but a part of your brain really doesn't want to. I think that that's something that is really relatable, and I want to commend Jenni for not pushing away the truth and living in this bubble. Instead, Jenni put her sister first, and I think that this is really a testament to how we should react in these types of situations. And especially in homes where they're homeschooled and sexual education is not made a priority or maybe not covered at all, you maybe don't even have the language or the understanding to explain negative sexual experiences or understand what consent is.
The thing that I have been saying a lot to people as I've been interacting with them is talking to them about consent and teaching even little kids about consent, not forcing them to hug or kiss people. Those sort of things to build a little bit of a structure for autonomy within the child.
This is a story here that's not just about Jenni. This is about hundreds, thousands of children who were impacted by the IBLP programming. We talked about there being an environment of secrecy and control, and this is exactly what made it so Jenni learned about the abuse so much later than some of her other family members. And she bravely also took on the responsibility of trying to educate her family and trying to be sort of an intermediary person to protect her younger siblings and help smooth things over.
And I was just trying to educate my family. Mostly I wanted them to say all the dumb things to me so they wouldn't say them to her.
When the abuse came to light, Jenni was able to navigate that with a lot of love, even though she was experiencing a lot of grief.
A lot of anger towards my parents. I blamed them for not taking action, for not asking questions, for telling my sister, like, well, you know, he said it's over, but if anything like that happens again, just let us know. And like, you put the onus on the victim to come to you, and never following up. They never followed up with either my brother or my sister to be like, hey, how's that going? There was nothing done to protect her from any future abuse.
Even though Jenni had her own feelings to work through, she still made her sister a priority.
The effects on me are, of course, dwarfed by the effects on my sister, who had talked to me about how, you know, at 6 years old, she didn't even know what was going on at all. From 6 to 15, that's such a critical developmental period, and it ended very abruptly when my parents found out.
She describes this information coming to light in her family as a bomb going off, and that it completely has shaken and kind of destroyed the view of the family that she had in her mind growing up.
It was like a bomb going off. My perceptions of what my family was, who we were, was just completely shaken.
In my opinion, this is a childhood that clearly illustrates the brutal reality of what IBLP does to households across the country, particularly households with multiple children, which is something that they encourage.
Risk factors, big families is a risk factor. I mean, look at the Duggars, you know, lack of sexual education.
This combination of a gender hierarchy and just a hierarchy in general, strict gender rules and educational neglect and, you know, kind of forced obedience, manipulated obedience, all of that allows abuse to persist, and all of that allows abuse to keep continuing over time without people really being able to detect it, because a lot of those behaviors have actually been normalized in their culture.
The fundamentalism, it's like I said, the combination of putting older brothers or even younger brothers, but brothers in a position of authority over their sisters is a recipe for abuse, coupled with not allowing the children to explore or learn about their bodies. It is a recipe for abuse, and I try to warn people.
Jenni bravely took the onus on herself to educate her family about a lot of these topics, and I can't even imagine what a difference that has made. And beyond Jenni's bravery and all of this, she even has been honest with her family about her religious deconstruction, which, as you guys know, is not an easy thing to do. Jenni really struggled with the theology that she had been taught and with the IBLP beliefs. Forgiveness for her family, for example, was not something that was optional, and forgiveness also looked like reuniting and coming back together, a full relationship with that person. It was something that was required and kind of something that needed to be done immediately. But a lot of us who have left the church have learned that forgiveness without any accountability or boundaries is essentially meaningless. Unfortunately, a lot of us have had to learn that lesson in a variety of different ways throughout our lives. I just want to be clear that it is the exact same system that has kept abuse hidden for so long that also tries to demand emotional labor from the people that they hurt. And at the same time, they also excuse and minimize their own behaviors. And this is something that we see. It is the pattern of abuse. And we can't really talk about IBLP without talking about how it impacts dating life. Her romantic life is just another example of how IBLP teachings have really impacted her autonomy. Jenni shared about the relationship she was in and how she was impacted by it. And eventually she did marry, but the lack of family support and the rocky road to get there and the hardships throughout, some of the warning signs that started to crop up, all of that made things challenging. I talk about it on this channel all the time, but deconstruction is a really hard process, and it certainly wasn't any different for Jenni.
It can be very hard, very easy to feel untethered. So for anyone who's been going through deconstruction or questioning these things, I know that it can be very scary, and I can't tell you that it's great or you just need to get over this hump and everything's wonderful. But the beliefs that I had were hurting me and were hurting the people around me. It is worth it, especially if your beliefs were hurting you or those around you.
She had to spend years, like many of us, trying to unlearn all of the different teachings that she had been inundated with since a young age. She had to grieve the loss of her grandmother all over again, among other things. It just goes to show you how deep these things can go and how many different areas of your life it can impact. It can also be hard when your sense of self is wrapped up in obedience or in submission for so long to then completely do away with that framework and know how to move through the world. It really does change things quite a bit. Jenni's story illustrates a few different themes. The first being the dangers of engaging with a really rigid religious authority and trusting them above all else, especially experts in child development. Secondly, the way that secrecy can enable abusers and cover up their abuse. And finally, the consequences of having a very rigid and gendered hierarchical structure, especially in your family.
Especially the authority of a big brother allowed a lot of control. The fact that he was given authority over, well, all of us, like I said before, if my dad died, I would be under his authority. So he was the second most important person in the household, and that definitely played a role in him being able to do this for years. And I was among the very last of my family members to be told about this. I think it's important to acknowledge the educational neglect and the level of sheltering and isolation. It narrowed my brother's opportunities for exploration.
It also definitely covers the long-term psychological impacts that it can have on people who go through IBLP programming or grow up in high-control religious environments. It's something that we can take both as a warning moving forward, something that we should stay away from, but also it can be a call for us to try to be more aware and to try to notice more of these signs in our own lives and in the families around us. I definitely wanted Jenni to share some of her insight with you guys about what you can do if you are in a situation like this. What resources did she find? And so Jenni was actually able to share some really helpful resources with you guys.
My parents still had not asked the questions about the level of severity and scope, and didn't understand that the coercive control, or the, why that just because they seem okay does not mean they are okay. And so I actually got this book I found called Sibling Sexual Abuse. I would say if you discover this in your family, read the book. It talks a lot about the various factors that lead to it.
Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you've made it this far, please like the video, hit share and copy link. You don't have to send it anywhere, I promise, and subscribe to my channel, or double check to make sure that you are subscribed if you're not already. If you guys want to support me extra, you can always drop a comment down below. Please let me know what you guys think about this episode, and if you'd like to see more interviews. I've kind of taken a pause on them because they've seemingly been a little bit less popular, but I really do believe in them, and man, I'm setting on such good interviews that I really do want to release, so I am probably going to start putting them back out regardless. But let me know if there's anything specifically that you guys would like to hear about, or that you would like to speak on. You guys can always fill out the form in the description of my channel if you are interested in being a guest. Once again, thank you so much for watching if you made it this far, and I will see you guys in the next one.